All right, so we are recording. Welcome everybody to the update on Governor Wolf's budget address. It is a delightful budget, and I'm really excited that we're going to be able to talk about this tonight. So Governor Wolf's budget proposal. We're going to talk about our priorities and updates. We'll talk about Governor Wolf's budget proposal, including the basic and special education funding proposed amounts. We'll talk about higher education funding, including the Nellie Bly scholarships, charter school reform, anticipated legislative response, and then our next steps. So our goals are to share what we know about the budget, to talk about advocacy activity, and then to make plans to build support for this really truly historic funding proposal. So I think most people here already know this, but I'm going to kind of go over the problems that we have and why this budget is so important. So state funding is inadequate, and a low state share in Pennsylvania means that we have a really heavy over-reliance on local wealth, which means we've got property taxes that we have to really rely on to fund our schools. Because of that, high wealth communities are able to raise enough money to fund their schools, but low wealth communities aren't, and it leads to this huge gap between the haves and the have-nots. According to a bipartisan analysis reviewing the state's education funding system, 277 Pennsylvania districts need more than $2,000 per student to adequately support their students' learning needs. And we have a total gap between what we're spending and what we need to spend of $4.6 billion statewide. Low wealth communities that need the most and that try the hardest, like many low wealth communities in Pennsylvania, have some of the highest property tax rates in the Commonwealth. Those kids get the least, and they're so far behind that we really need to make sure that we're accelerating funding to these school districts because the kids who are in these buildings don't have time to wait for decades to catch up. The state legislature can fix the inequality and the deprivation, and it is their constitutional duty to do so. I think a lot of you probably know that the school funding lawsuit is taking place right now in Harrisburg. It started on November 12th. And we're getting close to the end, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this year, we have a really different situation in Harrisburg than we have had in previous years. So, typically in Harrisburg, we are facing budget deficit where there is not enough revenue coming in to cover the expenses going out. But that is completely different this year. For like the first time in a very long time, we have a really huge projected state surplus. So by the end of June, when they have to pass the budget, we're expecting to have billions of dollars in surplus. So this comes from a few things that some are one-time funding from the ARP money, and some are just greater revenue that's coming in at a higher clip because the economy has recovered and the tax revenues that are coming into Harrisburg are very robust. So we project that we'll have a state budget surplus of recurring revenue about $2.5 billion by June, and additional revenues of $2.2 billion that have already come in this year, just state taxes that have come in above what we expected. We have a rainy day fund that was set aside last year of $2.6 billion. Then we have unspent COVID relief American Rescue Plan funding. We have $2.6 billion in that. And then there's like this wonky little Medicaid reimbursement from the federal government. But that Medicaid reimbursement means that we're going to have $1.8 billion in additional revenue this year than we were expecting. Some of this is one-time revenue, so you don't want to like put that into recurring expenses and get yourself into like a problem. But a lot of this is just, we've got our economy is chugging along. There is funding, as the Budget and Policy Center says, Pennsylvania is flush with cash and it's time to use it. This is not the time for state lawmakers to sit on a giant pile of money in Harrisburg and refuse to spend it on our kids. So Governor Wolf's budget proposal is historic, and it actually is like the exact proposal that we need at this moment in time. So we've seen in the school funding lawsuit, I've got my little roll of toilet paper here from our rally, 75 students sharing a single toilet, actually 125. Just really the deprivation we've heard is unconscionable. So this is the moment when we need this funding. I think everybody understands that, and we also have the money to pay for it. So Governor Wolf has proposed a $1.25 billion increase in basic education funding that would go through the formula to all 500 school districts. He has also proposed on top of that a $300 million level up supplement that would be allocated through the basic education funding formula to the 100 poorest school districts in the state. You probably saw we did level up last year, was the first year that we did this. It's a way to accelerate funding. Nice little postcards. If you want to send postcards to your lawmakers, we've got boxes of these. It drives money to the 100 poorest school districts to accelerate funding to lift up the children who've been most deprived of resources. These school districts educate a hugely disproportionately large number of students of color, of poor students, and of students with disabilities. And then we also, he's also proposed a $200 million increase in special education funding, $5 million for career and technical education, and $20 million for the PA SMART program. And when we're done, I will email this, this presentation to you. And if you click on this slide, it'll take you to a page where you can actually look at the spreadsheets and see the allocations for each school district. So you'll have to look for basic education funding on one spreadsheet and special education funding on another spreadsheet. For higher education, he is making a very strong commitment to trying to make higher education more affordable and more accessible. Typical tuition at the least expensive four-year institution, our state system schools, is about $25,000. So the dream of being able to go to college is just getting further and further out of reach of kids from working families. So he's proposed again the Nellie Bly Scholarship that would provide actual scholarships to students who have financial needs. It should say $88 million. It's $200 million. It should say $88 million from the Racehorse Development Fund. The remainder would come from additional American Rescue Plan dollars. There is a $75 million increase for the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education universities. And then there was an agreement when the system last year voted to consolidate 6 of their campuses into 2 regional universities. There was an agreement that there would be $150 million in one-time funding that could be used to help facilitate that consolidation and to work and to spend on other pieces of one-time costs in the university system. So we would really love to see these scholarships go through. They would be life-changing for students. So you will soon see us do an online action thanking Governor Wolf for supporting these scholarships for state system and community college students. Our kids graduate from high school and so many of them cannot afford to access higher education. This would be, really life-changing for a lot of students. So you'll see this, and I would appreciate it if you would sign and share, because when Governor Wolf makes these proposals, he oftentimes doesn't hear from people who are supportive and who are grateful. All he hears is the other side, and they say, we're not going to do it. This is crazy. And I think it can be very discouraging. This is his last budget. I really think that we can get some of this stuff across the line. So he deserves a huge thank you for his proposals. And again, these scholarships proposing to take money from the Racehorse Development Fund. We spend more money for in-state subsidy on horses, like for each racehorse, than we do for each student who goes to a university, which is bananas. And so we really need to shift that priority. And because higher education, we rank 47th in the nation in terms of state support for higher education. So it is a family paying tuition driven system. And the students in Pennsylvania who graduate from college have an average student debt of $39,000, which is one of the highest amounts per graduate in the nation. And so it's an unsustainable system. Then he has also proposed funding for our other higher ed institutions. So community colleges, Penn State, Pennsylvania College of Technology, the Landscript Fund, University of Pittsburgh, Temple, Lincoln, Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. So he has a very robust higher education plan to help support this for the people who are coming up, who we need to have be our teachers and our nurses and our doctors and our lawyers and everything else. He has also proposed charter school reforms. These are the same as he proposed last year. The cyber charter rate, there's a calculation and it went up a little bit. So the cyber charter tuition rate would be flat in this proposal. Instead of having every school district spend a different amount, every school district would pay $9,800 per student for a regular education student in a cyber charter school. And the special education formula would be applied to all students in all charter schools, so that we would actually be starting to more closely match the amount of funding that a school district paid to a charter school for a student with a disability with the actual cost of providing services for the student's disability. So this would save school districts $363 million because their tuition, the tuition payments that they make would go down. I saw that last year. All the property taxes that school districts raised, that amount was actually less than the increase in what school districts had to pay to charter schools. So these charter school tuition payments, because of the calculation in the law, are just exploding. And we've seen a large migration of students to these cyber charter schools because of COVID. And so it's an unsustainable system. It needs to get fixed. And so this is an absolutely wonderful way to very fairly fix the charter school funding. He has also proposed other reforms, performance standards for charters, a moratorium on new cyber charter schools, ensuring charter school operators are held to financial and ethical standards. It seems like they already should be, but they're not. And then greater financial oversight. And, you know, we filed some right to know requests, and we found that over the last 2 years, cyber charter schools have spent $35 million on advertising. They are awash in so much excess funding, they cannot spend it. So Commonwealth Charter could afford to buy the Macy's and keep one floor of it to lease out to a client. And then they have like a whole Macy's store for their cyber charter school. They have another office park in Malvern. I mean, it is extraordinary how much money these schools have that they can't even figure out how to spend it. And so as Larry Feinberg, who's the director of the Keystone Center for Charter Change, said, there is a straight line from charter tuition overpayments to increased local property taxes. It's long past time for the Pennsylvania legislature to pass charter reform. So this is an issue that I hope that we can really stay on top of and get a good reform this year. Governor Wolf has also proposed some modest changes to Pennsylvania's educational improvement and opportunity scholarship tax credit programs, where, and I needed to update this, it's actually increased. Businesses can make a, quote, donation to a scholarship organization and then receive either a 75% or 90% tax credit for their donation. And then the scholarship organization has a pot of money. They are allowed to keep 20% of whatever they get to do whatever kind of administrative things they want, you know, whatever, pay their wife who runs their scholarship organization a nice salary to run it, keep it for whatever. We have no idea how they spend the 20%. And then the 80% is given to students who go to private schools for vouchers. There is no financial or academic accountability. All of this money comes out of the state treasury, and I needed to update this from last year. It is up to, I think it's up to $230 million right now that goes into these scholarship programs that is unavailable to be spent other places. So Governor Wolf is proposing to reduce the funding that the scholarship organizations get to skim off and just keep from 20% to 5%. So that would actually increase the scholarship money that's available to students by $41 million. And also require scholarship organizations to report more information about the families that receive this funding. So right now, we don't know who gets the funding. There is no way to audit these programs to understand if they are within an income limit that they're supposed to be in, or if they're just giving money to families that are super wealthy who are already sending their kids to charter schools. There's no safeguards against families like cutting deals where they're going to donate money and then get reduced tuition in return. And ultimately, there has been not a single any piece of data that has demonstrated that after all these years, we put well more than $1 billion into this program. There's no data to show that we've got any kind of increased student achievement. So Governor Wolf's proposal is modest, but it would be a step in the right direction. And Governor Wolf has typically the Republicans would like to see like some enormous increase. And as part of the budget deal, they agree to pass the increase in like public school funding and insist on an increase in the EITC and OSTC. So we are working on a report about this, and we're hoping that we can kind of like tamp down enthusiasm about this program because it is very grifty and it is very expensive and just not a good program. So so here we are, you know, what can we do, right? It is Governor Wolf's last year in office. He has been unapologetically pro-public education from the first day that he walked into the Capitol. This was one of his top issues. There are a lot of people who are kind of squishy, where they're like, I like public education, but I think private education is good too. Let's just have good schools. Like, Governor Wolf has been focused from day one on getting funding into the schools that need it the most. And this is our last shot with a governor whose heart is in the right place. And we have to hope that next year we will elect a governor who will also be really supportive of public education. But, you know, this is a big year. The school funding lawsuit is hanging over Harrisburg. There's been a lot of talk about that. We have new districts, new legislative districts. So there are going to be some candidates who are going to be in places where they're feeling maybe a little like not so sure they're going to be able to get reelected. So they might really be willing to like go big on an education budget if it means they get to go home to their district and they can say, look at all the funding I brought back to our schools. So, you know, this is a year when I think we have enormous opportunities, and the fact that there's this huge budget surplus, I think just like this is the year. This is the year that we all need to double down, and we need to do what it's going to take to get as much money in this budget as we can. So I'm just going to list some things that you can do. And when we're done, I'm going to put in the chat a little sign up form for you so that if you're interested in like getting more information about any of these things, we'll be able to contact you. So we are working on Ed Voters virtual house party because what we need to do is like build our base. I think all of us are here. A lot of people I know, we've been like in this fight for a long time, and it's time for us to bring in kind of a new generation of advocates. So Katya has been just, again, using her fabulous talents to build like this virtual house party packet, and Sandra has also been helping with this. So like we're a whole team now, and I have to say like we're a really good team. So if you would be willing to host a virtual house party, invite 10 or 15 friends, and we can share with you what it looks like beforehand. So if you're interested, you can sign up in the little form, and we can send you more information. We have a letter to the editor helper, and so if you would like to submit a letter to the editor in support of the governor's budget, we can help you. So you can let us know that. We are still working really hard to get school boards to pass a resolution in support of the school funding lawsuit. If Ed Voters does actions, it's really helpful if you would be willing to share those. So when we are calling for charter school reform or supporting the Nellie Bly Scholarship Fund, that helps kind of like raise the awareness among your network of people, and it helps bring people in. We are going to be having a school funding lawsuit vigil on March 15th. So that is also something statewide. There will be more information coming out about it, but we're envisioning just people all over Pennsylvania getting small groups of people together. It could be in your living room, it could be in your front yard, in your backyard. You could go to a park on March 15th to have us come together to just have a moment to reflect on the fact that the school funding lawsuit was filed in 2014, and here we are in 2022. We expect it to be finished by the middle of March, and all of that work is done. And I think it's a moment for us to reflect on that, and then to commit ourselves to taking the next couple months to really working hard to get these kids the funding they deserve. And then we're going to want people to meet with lawmakers in the spring, a little closer to budget season. We're kind of thinking a lot of them are going to be a little distracted before the primary, so I think they might listen a little bit more after the primary. So if you stay tuned to the Ed Voters emails, we're going to follow the budget hearings. April, May, or June, if you could think about making time to meet with your lawmakers. We expect to see voucher legislation. We're going to have to like beat that back again. It's like clockwork in Harrisburg. And then we're going to have a few little resources that are going to be coming out. We actually did, if you go to our website, you can see them. We did 500 school district fact sheets that show how much your school district would save with the proposed charter school reform. We did them all with the $9,500 amount that we thought was going to stay the same this year. The charter, the cyber rate got changed to $9,800. So we are in the process of redoing those, but we hope to have those up by the beginning, like a week and a half from now, they should be up. PA Schools Work is doing these really snazzy, neat talking points memos about education issues. So we're going to have those on a weekly basis that we can email out to you and then share on social media. We have a forthcoming report on EITC and OSTC, and then we're going to have training modules that will be set up in a classroom so that you can go in and on your own, at your own time, like learn about like what is a school board, you know, what is basic education funding, what is special education funding, and you can kind of do this whole package together. So that is all coming, but not quite ready. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we'll just talk about what's most important to you, what do you need, and then these are our emails. I can put them in the chat, and then I think I'm going to stop sharing so that we can kind of have a conversation. And I have not looked in the chat, so I will need to do that. But if you have questions, we're not like a huge group here, so you could just kind of raise your hand maybe, and we could have questions. Yes, Susan Noel.
Yeah, so I'm from Lancaster County, and my our representatives here are Brian Cutler, who is Speaker of the House, and Scott Martin, who is the Senate Education Committee Chair. And both of them have come out in the last week already. Brian Cutler wrote like a very lengthy op-ed in our Lancaster newspaper about the budget from the governor and saying that it's bloated, it's irresponsible spending. Scott Martin's little piece this week was saying that, you know, like we are trying to steal from charter schools. So it's kind of reminiscent of what happened last year. And so I'm already starting to panic a little bit and say, like, even though we have the surplus, I can already see the Republicans around education stating like that we're being irresponsible. So I'm wondering, like, why is this year different, like as far as trying to negotiate with these these lawmakers?
I do think it's different because I think a lot of these lawmakers are going to find them. There are a lot more districts that are going to be a lot more competitive than they've been in the past. So people are seeing like whole new swaths of land that have been added into their districts. So they can't just kind of rely on their incumbency. And then we also are going to see some of these districts that are going to be a lot more balanced in terms of like a Democratic, Republican voter registration. And so, you know, I think that there is going to be a lot more pressure on a higher number of people to be able to say that they actually did something other than sit on, you know, $10 billion and hold it and hoard it in Harrisburg. So there's that. And I do think that the school funding lawsuit has created a sense in the building that they're going to have to do something, and that this is a problem, and that this isn't like they can't really just keep saying, you know, no, this isn't a problem. I think that this narrative has become much greater than that. And then I also think this whole charter school tuition that districts are paying, it is a problem. And school districts everywhere, we saw last year how many school districts had to raise taxes. And I think people are getting tired of having to raise taxes year in and year out. And so with the gubernatorial election coming, you know, I think it truly is going to be up to all of us to be saying loudly and vocally in communities all over the state, like, this is what we need this budget for our kids. And so we're going to frame that narrative. And I think that's why I think we're all going to have to double down. And so Republicans are, of course, like, or anyone who opposes this budget is going to just go out and be like, done, it's not going to happen because that's what they want and that's what they want people to think. And I think they want people to feel cynical. And I think this is like the year when we really can't feel cynical and we just have to feel like we're going to do the work and we need other people to help us. So I think we need to start thinking about other people that we can bring in and, you know, engaging, you know, unlikely people to get them to contact their lawmakers. And so like a good thing for all of us to do would just be to like get off this Zoom tonight and just call your state lawmakers and say, I'm Susan, I'm your constituent, and I want you to support Governor Wolf's education budget without cuts, no cuts. Get on board and just support it. And I think that if we can get people to hear that, I think that we shape the narrative. And so I think there are opportunities to do letters to the editor, and there's a lot we can do. So I feel all right, Susan. I'm feeling good. I know it's hard when you've got like two legislators who have just, you know, and you've got the newspaper there and then they've just been like, this is dead on arrival, but I don't think that's the case. So, yep. And I see Susan Siegel with her hand up.
Thank you, and thanks everyone. And Susan, thanks for all you're doing. A question about the lawsuit and all the crazy zany quotes that are coming out from, I guess, the defense. Wondering if the communications team that you're all working with is going to put together like top 10 hits, like of stupidity that we could just march around with and post. And you know, when you say be loud and be proud, it's like you can't believe what's happening, and I worry that this isn't going to get enough attention. I mean, you know, oh, everything was plagiarized, so that person couldn't be here anymore, and I'm trying to follow it, and I can't even, you know, keep up with all the idiocy. So I'm just like, you know, it's from their own mouths. This is what they're defending. They're defending their beliefs, and we don't believe in their beliefs. So how do we capture the best of the best, the top 10 hits, and repurpose them as it relates to this budget issue? Just a question.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I know that we're compiling the top 10 hits, but I don't know that we've really been able to process how to best use them. So that is actually a really, really good idea. So like when the trial's over, you know, then we can go revisit the things that have been said, like the, you know, what would somebody on the McDonald's track need for Algebra 1? I don't know if anybody watched the Commonwealth Charter Academy CEO who was under cross-examination. It was a thing of beauty. It was just, I mean, the witnesses they brought have been pretty indefensible. So, but that's a really good idea, Susan. I will bring that back to the team. That's a great idea. Yep. Are there other questions? Yeah, there is a, you know, Jackie asked, yes, there is in the budget, there is like a small decrease in the corporate tax rate. And I also think like as we go further into this negotiations, a message needs to be, you don't get to cut corporate taxes until you fund our schools. You know what I mean? And I think that is something that has to happen inside the building and outside the building. Like it is unconscionable that they would talk about cutting corporate taxes. And I understand that like they are starting to close the Delaware loophole also, but I don't know that I don't think it makes up, it's not an even switch. So, you know, I think that probably is going to be part of a discussion in Harrisburg too, among the lawmakers. That will be a bargaining chip. Are there other questions?
Yes. Eve, yes. Can you come here, please? Where's the star?
Well, they listen to you. So what did you want? You can talk.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry. I'm Bob Childs. I'm from Hazleton. I was a school board member here for 16 years, 4 years of which were productive and 12 years which were not productive. I'm a retired pediatrician, so I have all sorts of investments in children from top to bottom. What I'm seeing in the school district here right now is we have 60% of our students being Latino. There's been a serious influx of Latino citizens to this community over the last 20 years. So 60% of our students are Latino, and less than 2% of our staff are Latino. The consequences of this are rather gross. When the pandemic closed down the schools in March of 2020, our school district couldn't find 4,000 of their 12,000 students. The nepotism in the district is overwhelming. Gross, out of sorts. We rank in the bottom 10% of the state academically, and yet our central administrators, including two former board members, just got a 17% salary increase into the $150,000, $160,000 range. This is grotesque. Okay, it's just a travesty. And the question comes as to how do you prevent the supplemental funding going to the individual school districts from being misused in the way that this district will misuse them?
So I think that that's not something that, you know what I mean? I think that Pennsylvania is a local control state. So there are sometimes they will put money out through a grant program, like the accountability block grant, that has to be used for specific purposes, like, increasing teachers in early education. But I think at this point, that is kind of beyond the scope of what like we can advocate for kind of at the state level. I mean, I think it's a local issue, and I hear what you're saying, and I think it can be very frustrating. And I think that a lot of people are now starting to see what you've seen with school boards that are not supportive of the students who are actually attending the schools. And I think that is like a really hard problem. Hazleton is also incredibly underfunded. They're a school district where they don't have the resources that they need. And I think that if the resources went into the building, you know what I mean? I don't know that you would, we can't dictate how they would spend the resources, but the resources going into that building to hire additional teachers would be a benefit to students. But I think at the state level, like it's a local control state, so that really, truly these decisions are going to be up to your school board.
No, I would correct what you said. This past year, Hazleton had a surplus from its budget. Okay, and not that it should have.
Could we talk about this? Like maybe you and I can talk later, because we've got all these other people. I want to make sure that everybody can ask their questions, because it's so specific to Hazleton. I don't know if there are other questions, but I'm happy to hang on with you after, you know what I mean, after everybody gets off, if that's okay. Does that sound all right?
Thank you very much.
Yep. Are there other questions? Yes, Jackie. Yep.
So this is just another I've heard things questions, but I've heard things about people and groups pushing back against the 45K mandatory teacher salary. And I was just like, is Ed Voters for this? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We support the $45,000 teacher salary. I just hadn't put it in there, but yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, I think there's like some districts where they're starting their teachers in like the 30s. And, you know, I mean, especially in a state when it costs you $100,000 to get a college degree, you certainly can't ever be a teacher in that district. Yeah, so I should have put that in there. It wasn't part of my budget thing, but yeah, we support the minimum teacher salary 100%. Yeah.
Excuse me, Susan, can I have a permit to open the document for the about participating in activities? The one that you
did I not need the right permissions? Yep. Oh, hold on here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm like, I feel like I'm too old to be able to do these things right.
We all struggle, Susan. It's okay.
These Google Docs, you would think I would have it right now. I would know how to do them.
Yes, don't let me open, but maybe you can share with me later.
Yep. There.
Thank you.
Does that work now? Okay. Well, now we know that Gabby was the only one who tried to get in it. So I think everybody else should go, and I'm going to put it back in the chat. It'll just help me if you want to get more information about submitting a letter to the editor or something. It's just an easy way to be able to like communicate back with you or to do a visual or something. So thank you, Gabby. Any other questions about this, about the budget proposal? All right, well, I know it can feel like we just are constantly doing the same thing over and over again, but we have gotten a lot of big wins for kids, and the whole Level Up supplement and being able to talk about equity and driving additional dollars to the schools that educate kids who need it the most is actually like a huge leap that we have made in being able to talk about education in Pennsylvania. And so I am excited about this, and I will send you out I'll send the presentation, I'll send all this information to you, and we'll look forward to being able to really dig into some good advocacy around this year as we kind of move out of the digesting the budget into the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen with the negotiations. So if there are no more questions, I am happy to say goodnight and talk to Evilise and her husband.
It looks like
Susan's got a question.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah. Hi, Susan Spica. This is Sue Welsh from Indiana, PA. And can you speak at all to this PA House Bill 272 regulating charter and cyber charter administration? Is there any traction around that? Is that any? It's bipartisan, which is promising, and it's sponsorship. But any news on the ground about?
I think that bill is it's gonna depend on the pressure that people put on lawmakers to vote on it. And so I think if they feel like they're getting a lot of heat in their districts and they cannot, you know what I mean? Like they're going to the grocery store, people are mad at them, they're getting a lot of phone calls. If we can get the rank and file Republican members to put the pressure on their leadership, so on Brian Cutler, then I think that we could see that coming up for a vote. Or what's more likely going to happen, I think, is that it's a problem. And so there are negotiations going on among all of the parties to try to kind of come to some kind of compromise. And I can guarantee that none of us will think that compromise is what we want, but it will, you know what I mean? It will probably be a lot better than what we have now. So, you know, I don't know that House Bill 272 will get a vote per se, but I think using that as a tool to tell lawmakers that they need to reform charter school funding, I think is that's I think the path to put pressure on them to do that. I have to say we did that press conference with the about the charter school advertising, and then we had 800 and some Ed Voters people sign a letter to the Auditor General saying you need to audit the cyber charter schools, and people didn't just sign their name. Many people wrote very long screeds inside of their name. And so it was like 45 pages of people who had signed a letter, and I sent it to the Auditor General's office and I said, I would like a meeting, please. And within 2 days, we set up a meeting. So we're meeting to talk, and there are 5 people from his team, and we're gonna talk about that. And you know, they have budget hearings, so the Appropriations Committee the Appropriations Committee for the House and the Senate will have a hearing for each of the governmental departments. So like the Education Department goes, the Auditor General's office has to go before the Appropriations Committees and talk. And so we are hoping that we can make part of the conversation, why have you not audited cyber charter schools? You know, like how can $1 billion go into these schools each year and we have no idea how it's being spent? And so I think there are multiple different pressure points to go after the charter school funding. And I just want to say, like, I don't think I would have gotten in a meeting with the Auditor General to talk about this if we had not had so many people sign the letter. And, you know, and we could say, like, there are 830 people who really, you know, from all over the state who are not happy with this. So it makes a difference. The one other thing that's like, a little wonky and doesn't seem like a big deal, but actually is kind of a big deal. There is a regulatory process in Harrisburg, and Governor Wolf's administration, the Department of Education, has created regulations for charter schools. And so I think a lot of you probably remember we wrote up all the stuff about the charter schools, and then people sent letters in support. We had like hundreds and hundreds of letters of support. So the final regulations today were sent to the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. They call it IRC. And so they will be with IRC for a month. And then after that, they go to the legislature. And then the legislature actually has the power to like vote them down. So we are seeing this as like a big battle in terms of the charter school stuff. It shouldn't be, but just to give you a heads up that this charter regulation, which actually can make a significant difference in terms of like a functioning charter school law, just clarifying the law, that's going to come up. And so like a lot of times things don't happen with these big grand, like the bill that you love gets passed, but you can make like these little incremental steps. And again, like when IRC goes and looks, the fact that we had like 600 letters in support of the regulations sent in to help counterbalance everything that the charter schools had sent in actually carries a lot of weight and makes a big difference. So, you know, we do a lot of the little stuff, but the little stuff actually makes a big difference. So
Yeah, thank
I'm
you.
just so proud of all the voters people. I just think you guys are all just so fantastic. So any other questions? Well, if not, you guys are a fast learning group, and you know, thank you. There will be some emails coming out with stuff, so just, you know, keep up with your emails, and you know, we'll be in touch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and Ann Simmons is there. Hi, Ann. So nice to see you. I was out your way. I went up to Erie the other day to go to Governor Wolf's press conference in Erie, and I drove up past Clarion and up past Oil City. I had never been to Erie before, so it's very pretty up there.
Thank you, Susan. I'm very proud of the fact that there are 3 league members participating in this from the League of Women Voters of Indiana County. And
you guys, you're rock stars.
Thank you. So thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah. Good night, all.
Thank you. Good night. Good night.
Yeah, Nancy.
Susan, you'll be available to talk with me and my husband?
Yep.
So we can
I'm
stay
gonna hang
here?
out, and then we can. Yep, you can just stay here, and then we can just talk as long as we want.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Well, I'm gonna stop recording.